Good afternoon. This is Travis Marker. I'm with Marker Law Mediation, and I'm doing this program with Steward Growth. And I'm here today with America Francis, who's the director of Steward Growth. And we are doing our business startup toolbox session. Today, the theme or the genre of our discussion is going to be about paradigms inside the workplace. So, the idea of how do you shift your thoughts or maybe understand another person's thoughts in context of what you are doing specifically inside your business or inside your project or venture, and maybe how do you see the other people and the role they're playing psychologically in your process. I'm going to open the idea with one of the things that I notice about many individuals who want to start a business is that they have been an employee for many, many years. And in the employee-employer relationship, they have not had the self-initiative often to kind of go out on their own and create a thing out of their whole cloth or out of their inspiration, or out of their guidance. Like their intuitive freedom has been somewhat controlled and structured by the process of their employer or the system that of the job they got a job that inside the roles of their job. And that lack of intuitive initiation prevents them from waking up every day and saying, I am so excited to go to work because I get to create my own thing. Where all of a sudden, when you start a job or you're forced to start a job, there's all that structure or those infringements upon your ability to be creative and think creatively are now gone. And you're expected to think creatively. You're expected to think with initiative. You're expected to think with drive, because it's all up to you how the thing gets done, whatever this thing is or your passion is that you're working on. So for me, um, what I when I kind of finally embraced that, and some of that for me was actually creating a paradigm of a farmer, because my grandpa was a farmer, but I have my other grandfather was in business, but he also had a garden. So for me, it was very consistent that I would hear them say things like, the cows won't milk themselves, or the tomatoes will not grow on their own, or things like that, where I was aware that they were telling me if I cared about the thing, I had to understand I had a duty to the thing. And so it made me aware that you have to be aware of the things that you're accountable for and how you're going to make them sustainable. And some of that might be you have to study them, you have to like nurture them, you have to whatever, but you have to invest in the stewardship of that thing. So for me, when I started my law office, I had no idea how to start a business because I had never been in business. I had a brother-in-law who said, um, open up your practice, it'll work out. And I thought, well, there you go. That sounds easy. And I had no idea what that actually meant. And then,
Woo.
yeah, I was like, whoa. And he says, well, I can give you an office space that's $200 a month. And I said, sweet, that sounds cheap. But then I had no ability to pay 200 a month. I wasn't making any money. And I didn't necessarily say that, but then he says, well, here, I'll give you a public defender contract that will pay you $50 a month because you're going to be the person who just does this. And it was a fairly limited role, but he basically carved it out so I would make $50 a month. So I'd already taken care of half of, three-quarters of a quarter of my rent. But I had to figure out the rest. And so what I did, because I realized um, it was my farm, like I had to make my farm run. I got a yellow legal pad of paper and I created 3 columns on that little legal pad of paper. And I outlined in every row things that I had to do the next day in order to create lead generation, income generation, referral generation, just straight up income, whatever I could do. Anything that came to mind, I brainstormed those 3 columns. And what, I don't know how many lines are on a yellow pad of paper.
Were
So
you married at this time?
I was married. I had 2 kids. So
Did
I
law
was
school not teach you anything about starting a practice?
zero. I had permission to practice law, and that was it.
Had you passed the bar?
I passed the bar. but I had no experience with whatever I had to do. So it was a really interesting position to be in to say, I now need to own a farm and like figure it out. Like how do I have to own it. Like there will be nobody who's going to pay my bills. There's nobody who's going to fix my problem. There's nobody who's going to whatever. So I
But
had
did
to
you look at joining another law firm? Was
sure,
that
but
interesting?
at that point there was actually an inundation of lawyers coming out of law school,
Oh,
and this was 2004, and the market wasn't super strong by way of hiring.
okay.
So I had applied to lots of different jobs, but there I was. And I'd come back from Australia, so because we were in Australia when I passed the bar.
Oh, you had a master's degree,
I had a
but
master's in.
probably a loan too, huh?
I did. I had my loans, but I was, thank goodness, in deferment. Like I had 6 months of deferment that I could like build my law practice during that time.
6 months is a short deferment if you have
It
a
was.
law practice to build.
Yeah, it was super stressful. So it was not easy to realize I was not an employee. Like this was my farm. And so totally embracing the idea of I'm going to do this meant there wasn't a shortcut. Like, I had to be anxiously engaged every day in building my practice. Have you had a situation like that where you're like, man, I got to own this thing?
Um, Not exactly like that. I think that kind of hit me when I moved to Washington, D.C. after I graduated from college because I left a really supportive environment. I was used to having all of the support of the university and roommates and things like that. And I moved out there with a 1 month contract. I was far away. There, the support was very different and it was stressful. I was making $20 a week and my parents were sending me money. They knew I wasn't getting income doing these internships, but I kind of looked around and said, I'm it. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have other people that were going to rescue me. I just had to figure it out.
And how did you, I guess, how did you embrace that?
Well, I just got interested in the work that I was doing. They actually didn't give me a lot of direction on the work. So I just tried to be helpful and tried to learn as much as I could. And I actually had an extension on one of my internships because I did some really interesting work. And the person that I was interning for, I'm sure had several interns. Like he wasn't very engaged during the first semester. But when I showed him the results at the end, he's like, tell me more about all this stuff that you did. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Like, I have this new opportunity for the next semester and I'd like to put you in this position. So he actually engaged a lot more after I had some results, right? Like I put together some cool stuff and then he thought, oh, maybe this person can add to what I'm doing and contribute to the work I'm doing. And then I did a lot more the second semester. But actually, I was so stressed out. So the first semester I had 2 internships and I alternated. And the second one I just had the one. But the environment in Washington, D.C. was kind of stressing me out. It didn't feel like a good fit for me. And so I was very relieved when I decided to go. And I kind of took that responsibility to say, whatever this is isn't working for me and I need to try something else. And then my next job was one of my favorite jobs ever, where I was working on this conflict resolution book in New Jersey. I was living in a lake house and I was working from home, doing really interesting work. And I had a lot of freedom in that job too, actually. So I guess I kind of got spoiled because with all three of those, with one internship, when there were problems, the the founder would say, "What have you done to break this?" And I actually hadn't done anything. He just had some computer issues. And so that was really stressful for me. But I got used to working independently and kind of doing my own thing. And I was working full time on the book. So I knew that I could work from home remotely, independently. And then working other types of jobs became more difficult. Like I had another full time job after that, but my favorite jobs really have provided a lot of freedom for me to do things that are interesting for me.
That's good. And I like that you're finding kind of quasi employment. Like you're finding employment that actually comes with a lot of freedom, which is not necessarily the norm, right? Depending on where people at in their skill base, they may not have as much ability to create that flexibility inside of what they're doing. Or like if you need to make a certain amount of money, sometimes your obligations change, or because you're trying to fit obligation to opportunity, where if you don't necessarily have a lot of stress on your need, then you can actually be pretty flexible in what you do. But if because if your parents are helping you out and they're just like, go have experience, like that's a different outcome than you have 7 kids and you got to figure it out, and like Christmas is coming. And that plays into, I guess, one of the thoughts that came up as you were talking was, I was in the ability, I started my practice, but my wife had to come with me, right? She didn't start a practice, she was raising kids. And so sometimes the paradigms connected with starting a practice relate to the people who are with us in our journey, or need us to be successful in our journey. And my wife basically married me when we got married. I had a 9 to 5 job, and like she relied upon me coming home at a certain time and this happening at a certain time and the income coming in at a certain way and in a certain way, and she did the finances, and so she could rely upon that check as long as I did my side. Well, when we started the practice, because she did have to say, like, I guess do it because like we need something right now, and
You
you
just
have
did all this law school.
she didn't sign on for, and when are we going to get paid, right? Or when do you get clients, or when is that going to happen, or when's this going to happen? Or and so we went 6 years with me getting more, like I would actively try to get more public defender contracts. And by so I started May of 2004 my practice, and by November of 2009 I think I had 5 public defender contracts. So it was nice because she knew there was 5 definite sources of income coming in. And then so that was kind of her base pay, was the contracts. And then I could make additional money from my other projects and other adventures or other clients. But at least we knew and she knew. And so there was kind of like a psychological piece. But also during that time period, there would be stresses where it's like, we just need a little bit extra. Like we need this. Like, why don't you try to hire at another law firm? And so I would look for, like, government jobs, and I interviewed with government jobs. I went with other law firms. But one of the things that had happened is I had become an independent person because I had not had, for 6 years, an employer. And so that became very difficult because I was not raised inside a firm environment. Like I wasn't going to come in as an associate who was like, okay, just tell me what to do, boss. I had ideas about what I should do. I had ideas about how it should happen. I had independence, and it became really unique because it was not attractive to people that I had my own law firm.
Well, and it's really hard to get your base built up when you don't have experience, because they say, well, what did you do in all these other situations? And you say, I just graduated and I haven't really ever done it ever. And they
Yeah,
say, what about your mentors and your other
yeah,
attorneys you can consult with? And you're like, well, I have some friends.
yeah. And so the fact that I wasn't hired right out of law school into a firm meant I wasn't shaped inside a firm to become a firm attorney, associate, partner.
Yeah.
I had shaped myself in the environment of entrepreneurialism and self-independence. And so I had at one point I had to realize again, so there's these periods of time where you will realize the paradigm that you need to have. I just realized I can't look for a job anymore. If I need more money, I have to create my job. And
Which actually makes you a better attorney consultant for small businesses, because if you started in a firm environment, you wouldn't understand that whole context.
sure, I totally agree. And so, but it was also really, it alleviated a lot of stress because I just had to own it. And there wasn't, so the idea that I might get hired somewhere else or I might get some other option later down the road, those are kind of like lifelines that were still kind of impeding my ability to be truly free. So
Yeah.
cutting them off allowed me to realize, no, this is it. And it doesn't mean it wasn't stressful for my wife, but once she saw that by embracing it, I actually was more successful, then she stopped worrying about it also. But there was also another adjustment that had to be made was my wife was doing the finances, which she had no control of because I'm the one providing the money.
Yeah.
So we eventually had to say, I will own the finances and I'll appreciate that I have to solve this problem. So,
Right.
and there was a month that we were kind of in a redevelopment phase where there was some bills that were late. And that was tremendously stressful for her because she was always very reliable and had it all very done, right? And the fact that they were late again brought in another paradigm of what are your priorities, you know? And there's a lot of entrepreneurial material that is say pay yourself first. And so I had two credit card payments that were late. And those are the only late payments that I that affected on my credit or whatever, but they still do, and they're still reminders of
They
that period.
still affect you?
Yeah, they're on there for 7 years.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay on time, but sometimes you just learn.
Or the minimum payments, right?
Well, you no, you have to pay them on time.
Yeah, you pay the minimum payments on time.
Yeah, yeah, but when sometimes when you're struggling and you're in development phase, you can't, right? Because you have to say what's my priority, and it was during that time I'm like I learned how much the price of bread was and milk and eggs because
Yeah.
there was no way I wasn't going to provide for my family, and I'm grateful that that didn't last like forever. Like it wasn't like I was like you know I was a lawyer, so like you're making stuff, but that doesn't mean you just don't have places where I'm going to provide for this right now. Like this is my priority, not that. And I'm going to make sure my family doesn't have to like suffer because I'm in this learning process.
Well, I'm kind of in it right now, actually, because before my parents were helping me and I really didn't have any expenses. And now I have dependents and my sources of income are changing. And I don't know what they'll look like necessarily. And I've got to make money and work. And I haven't been responsible for the income generation. And now I am. So that's a really big change and a shift to feel that kind of responsibility where I look around and I'm a grown up and I'm the one that has to do it.
Yeah. But it also helps you refine the focus the more the need increases though. Because you like maybe where you had the luxury to do lots of education, well, education doesn't create income. It might facilitate the ability to make income, but education doesn't create income. So like if you're going to read a bunch of books, that by itself doesn't make income. Like you, at some point, you have to say, I have the courage to try. I'm going to start doing stuff, and then it compounds. Like it's amazing how quickly, um, like so I started my practice, and within 6 months, I'd made $30,000, which was more than I had made to that point in my life because I had never, I'd never been a full-time employee. That I was like I worked at a boys' home like while I was going through law school, and so I mean before law school, and that was maybe $12 an hour, $13 an hour, and maybe I got to $15 an hour. So at one point, before taxes, I was maybe around 30,000. But
Thirty
then,
thousand in 6 months is nothing to sneeze at.
right. So I ended the year at $75,000, which I had never made in my life. So I was excited because I realized embracing and really getting involved in my process and in the method and owning it, like I made money.
Yeah, you could feel that sense of accomplishment that you wouldn't have felt if someone else had just paid you to do a job. You had to really exert yourself and figure it out.
Yeah, like and you have to really perform. Like you have to like you say, what's my product? How do I start to get there? How do I capitalize on it? How do I and one of the easiest things I did was I realized as soon as I start seeing things as strategic, so like if a divorce initially was $1,000, and this is in 2004, so they're not that now. So if I said I need to make 10,000 in a month,
Yeah.
I needed 10 divorces.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to think incrementally, well, how would I get 10 people in my office that I actually retain?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start to focus you can start to focus the achievability of your goal based upon what you have to accomplish. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I need to sell 10 widgets, well, how would I sell 10 widgets? If I need to teach 10 classes, how would I get 10 classes? So when I started my law conference series where I traveled the country teaching seminars, initially it takes 90 days to 120 days to have your first session. But once you have that set out 90 to 20 days, we started to set one every 2 weeks. So now I have a pipeline. I'm organizing conferences in 2 week intervals. So I have a
How'd
week
you
to,
get all those people to come?
so you have to say, how do I get people to come? Well, I knew they needed continuing education. So then I started figuring out how to get that data. So some of that was um, some places sold me the data, and some places I had to hire people to mine the data. And then you have to be compliant with the, can spam acts. Like you have to be compliant in how you market the material. But once you know where your clients are, then you figure out how to get their data. And some of this is probably a lead generation discussion, but there's a there's a thing called funnel marketing. And in funnel marketing, you start with how do you get at least the initial attention, and then you make it possible for the initial lead to be $5, or maybe it's $10, or maybe it's $50. But then you'll think about ways that you'll upgrade the costs potentially depending on your product. But it's very common for people to buy a $5 item, and that was the cost of the lead. But because they bought the $5 item, they're automatically in a database or a CRM that can now be emailed intermittently, or however often you want, without burning your database. And you offer them a new thing: $10, $50, $100, $10,000, $50,000. And depending on how you escalate that, and depending on the success of your initial products, people will start to move up that upgrade level, right? But now you have a database of attorneys, or a database of widget buyers, or a database of homeschoolers, or whatever. So at one point I had 300,000 attorney emails. And so
Mm.
the idea was, how do I just provide them the thing that they're looking for, because I was just one of many continuing education providers.
Well, I do want to mention that everybody doesn't have to do the sink or swim way. A lot of people start their side gigs while they're in a W-2 job. And also, it's okay if you go kind of in and out. Like if you had decided, I have to take a firm job for a little while to figure this out. And I understand that the market was hard, but you could have done some work in a more structured environment and then some work not in a structured environment. And learning how to do it on your own provided you a lot of freedom and a lot of options. I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, no, but what you're also identifying is that there's scales to income and risk. So, like if I need to absolutely provide for my family, I have to create a base level of income. So initially, that's what I treated the contracts like, because those were my base level of income was getting something I could guarantee it would come in every month. That's my base. But then I could also explore other opportunities that might create maybe more fluctuating variable income, but it might come in. So you're absolutely correct. So when the Rich Dad Poor Dad guy started, I can't remember his name, Robert,
Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah.
correct? Yeah. He worked at Xerox, and then so he sold Xerox machines so he could create a savings account. And then as soon as
Hmm.
he got it to a certain level, then he bought real estate. So and then he would rent the real estate or he'd flip the real estate or he'd sell the real estate, whatever he did with it. But so he has his base, which is the Xerox machines, and then he'd have the variable or fluctuating spike income, which would be the housing or whatever. So you're totally correct that it's not inappropriate to say, how do I pay my bills? And then while I'm paying my bills, what could I do that builds something else? Because there's definitely people who make a lot of money on Fiverr and Upwork, which is basically side gig work, but they might have a day job because when you do the side work, it doesn't matter when you do it. So you work your job at, wherever it might be, and then you come home and you're going to put in another 3 to 5 hours of just doing Upwork until freelance work until your freelance work becomes sufficient. Then you can weed out your other work.
You made another really good point about income generation work. So education does not create income. And a lot of people focus on things when they first start their business that aren't necessary or useful, like spending a lot of money printing cards and getting this workspace. And if you can identify assets that produce income, maybe you don't buy a car because it's not, or maybe you choose a different car and you get something that has a cash flow so that the things that you're putting your money into will make more money. And like you said, choosing activities, choosing priorities that will bring in real money versus other things you could do.
Yeah. Well, and you're coming into the discussion even about college degrees. Some people say if I get my college degree, I will get a job, which is it's not true anymore. And you definitely have to pay for your college degree regardless. Now, and I'm not in any way discouraging education because it's tremendously valuable. I read books every day, lots of books. I enjoy it. I have no, regrets about getting my college education. I also am aware of lots of people who started small businesses who have almost zero debt and they live within their means and they're getting their educations now after they got their income going. And I mean, it's one way to do it. Like also trade schools are exceptional because they are educating you towards employment and that could be self-employment or paid employment like with Boeing or a masonry company or a welding company. But it's important to see your education in terms of what am I doing with this? Because if you're just, like my son wants to go to flight school, which is important, and it's better if you have a degree when you go to flight school. So it
Mm.
doesn't matter what he gets his degree in, but it's a stepping stone to get into flight school, which you'll have to pay a lot of money for. But that educational avenue requires it. So there are times where you get education because it is a mandatory stepping stone. Um, but if you're also just staying in school because you're just hoping at some point you'll get the magic job, it probably won't happen.
And sometimes you can just do certificate programs or some kind of training where you can pass off tests and move through it quickly. And some people get so much debt trying to finish their education that their options are extremely limited. They can't go off and start their own business because they have this mountain of debt that they have to address, and they might have to do a job they really hate that pays better for a really long time.
Yeah. And if you get stuck, sometimes it's hard to kind of transition because you're obligated to what you're in. And you also settle. Like you become aware that you're like, I just don't know if I want to move on. Like I like being in a sedimentary, predictable life, which is not necessarily a problem. And there's thousands of people who live that way. I think what we're trying to advocate is living a goal-oriented life is, I think, way more passion infusing.
Well, I think also the because of the speed that the world is moving right now, getting stuck in a place really is a disadvantage because you get left behind really quickly if you're not paying attention to technological change or cultural change. I don't know, all the different changes. If you're not meeting new people, if you're not reading the books and getting new ideas, if you're not changing your behavior and going different directions, sometimes like if you're just stuck in the ruts, you may not be able to adapt to the things that happen.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And if you're not thinking about those adaptations or staying inside those cycles, you can lose your job, and then what do you do? Because depending on, like I'm almost 50, it would be nearly impossible for me to just get another job anymore because I'm actually now in that age bracket where the people are like, there's somebody else who could do your job. Isn't that amazing?
No, I know. I'm in the same age bracket.
Yeah. So, but it's also like stupid for me to not think about that. But I also realize, if you can become president at 70, like you could start a job between 50 and 70.
Well, that also brings up the idea of getting transferable skills because sometimes if you learn how to communicate and write, and I mean, there are lots of different types of skills, but if you can get skills that are useful in a lot of different environments, then if something happens in your industry or in your job, it's easier because you're valuable to other people doing what you do. So it's good to look at the things that you're good at and interested in and focus on some things that are transferable.
Absolutely. Well, and that's why I think also having multiple streams of income by way of starting your own business is it's not hard anymore to start multiple businesses and to have lots of things that are happening just because there's so many things you can follow tracks on that become passive income even in nature because a lot of things are automated, a lot of things are just happening and you just have to start the process, and that helps you to at least you're capitalizing on your experiences.
So how do you find mentors if you want to get into that and you haven't yet?
Yeah, very good. I was surprised when I was solving problems on my computer that you could just type in Google, how do I solve this problem with my computer?
Mm-hmm.
And
And
there's
YouTube.
there is a billion, like just work groups where they're like, yes, I've had this problem with, my iPhone, or I've had this problem with my Samsung phone, or I've had this problem with my browser.
Car. Yeah.
And then there's YouTube clips, there's also channels. So just like there's those same options for resources, oftentimes there's those same options for workplace questions or workplace things. I don't always do very good with the work groups because they are a little bit impersonal, and I like to know I can call Joe or Sarah or and say, "Hey, help me through this just real quick." And you create like a team. So the nice thing about Steward Growth that I like is that it's a collaborative team of people who are all basically independent employed. Like they all have their own businesses and they're working to volunteer to help Steward Growth become successful. And so we're creating a larger collaboration of independent entities versus um, employees. They're all waiting for Steward Growth to do something. Like everybody has this idea that they're coming into Steward Growth with a definite value that they're adding and exploring and playing with versus we're going to wait for so and so to tell us what to do and then we can move forward. Like everybody has in essence that initiative, but in that initiative everybody can also brainstorm in groups and workshops and say, hey, I'm working on this project in Kentucky or I'm working on this project in Maine. How would you guys see me playing this through? And now that we have technology like Zoom that allows us to collaborate, nobody has to be on site to solve that problem. We can all we create our mastermind group, if we're borrowing the Napoleon Hill concept of having surrounding ourselves with collaborative people who are invested in outcomes, even though we have different tracks of information, education, and workforce skills. We also have that independence to connect with each other.
To talk for a second about that whole passion thing you were talking about, because I think when people are doing things they like to do and they're interested in, that makes a big difference in the results of their effort.
I totally agree. And I hear some people downplay finding jobs inside your passion, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I also appreciate that there's a functionality to just being employed.
Mm.
So like if you need income, sometimes you take a job you don't like. But I think the ultimate problem is do you want to get up in the morning? And maybe your job is not the thing that gets you up, but living a goal-oriented life helps you get up in the morning. Like it for me, it helps me. Like if I know, and I have specific goals I track every day, and I'm aware if I'm not hitting them. I'm aware if I'm not moving on them. I'm aware of the accountability to myself if these things are not happening. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days. It doesn't mean I don't fall off the wagon or whatever. It doesn't mean I'm like, I got to take a break on this vision for a second. I'm going to take a nap or whatever. But being aware of what I'm actually trying to get to, like, is tremendously inspiring because I'm like, um, there's no reason not to get there. Like I'm aware that it's achievable, and via Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, internet, or wherever, like other people have done this thing, like whatever. I mean, and I'm speaking kind of abstractly about my specific situation, but the reality is there isn't something that hasn't been accomplished. Like most people have done these things that we might be striving to do. So like if you say I want to grow a papaya plant, well, figure out how to grow a papaya plant, and but you have to study it and get
How is
excited.
it going?
My I actually gave up on the papaya plants, and my daughter didn't. And we have like 30 papaya plants in our garage.
Really?
Well, there's a lot of seeds in a papaya plant, in a papaya fruit, right?
Oh, okay. Well, so I think part of the reason you were able to create that business is because you have some constructive habits. And I think if people want to be able to have that kind of freedom and do those types of projects, they have to create those habits. It's not just having a goal, you're being accountable, you're looking at it, what am I going to do today? And you've got some really constructive things that you're doing regularly that put you in a mode where you can accomplish those things.
Correct. Yeah, you definitely have to be like there's rules. I mean, there are rules. Like even in creativity, there's rules. I mean, even if one of the rules is um like I realized I was trying to be creative one time when I was creating some artwork, but the artwork was supposed to look abstract. And so I realized that one of the rules was I can't try because trying in my system created order.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to avoid creating order in an abstraction, right? I needed it to be abstract. So one of the realities was is I had to like give myself the freedom to just be free. Like if I recognized I was controlling something, I had to actually consciously say, stop controlling this thing. Like just throw it. Just try to like not try.
So actually that's another really important component of this is being in an environment where it's safe to try things. Like how can we help our kids or young people have the freedom to do things that might not work out so that they can try? Because if you're in a structured system, let's say you're in some type of culture where everybody is conforming in a really tight level, they're unable to think the same types of creative thoughts as some kids that are just given free reign to go wander in the woods. So part of our role, I think, as supporters of an entrepreneurial culture is to give people some type of support, like enough support and not too much structure.
Correct. Yeah, because you don't want to infringe upon somebody else's process, right? And particularly as they're developing process, you don't necessarily know the rules yet. But so you keep the rules a little bit more simple or broad. So maybe the initial rule is I'm going to wake up and use my legal pad of paper to create 3 columns of things I want to do. But there is no rules about what I'm going to do other than maybe the theme is I should be income focused in this column. I should be lead generation focused in this column. I should be something else focused in this column. Because like, let's say you say, I need to make 10 grand by, in 60 days. Well, there are rules to how you make 10 grand in 60 days. Like you have to literally think, who could help me sell this product? Who could help me drive this thing? Who could help me, whatever. But if you're saying I need to make 10 grand in 60 days, and how do I do that? Your yellow pad of paper that day is ideas on how to make 10 grand in 60 days.
So you can look at the models to get the rules, and also you do a ton of reading.
Well, or brainstorming or connecting with other people. Like whether it's however you get the education, you increase your ability to gather the resource, whether that's through other people, YouTube, Instagram,
Well, the point is you can't just keep doing the same thing if it's not working.
Correct.
You can't just keep thinking the same thoughts and make any progress.
Yeah, I agree that you have to drive yourself to be achieving the goal. So like for me, I'm appreciate that it's I have no idea where to put this goal, but mine was to reduce body fat, not just lose weight, but to reduce body fat. So it changed the way I exercised because my goal wasn't just to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
It was to specifically increase muscle and lose fat. So that's different, right? That's not like I'm just gonna like not eat Cheetos or I'm just gonna go to the gym 3 times a week. I have to think about how am I engaging with my body? How am I working with my body? How am I processing with my body? Now there could be some minimum things I do, like I get 7 to 10,000 steps. Well, activity definitely helps you burn calories, but I also don't want to lose muscle. So getting 7 to 10,000 steps in a running the whole time is not going to be good unless I'm also maybe eating enough protein. So you have to learn the rules that are engaging with the thing. Like, so I have to learn the rules about engaging with my body that could relate to hydration, to sleep, to how I burn calories, to the food I eat. And it's because I'm not just coming with a general goal of lose weight. I'm looking at a different goal of lose body fat.
If you're starting a business, how do you learn the rules and how do you assess at the beginning when you still have plenty of time to change directions a little bit?
Yeah. So like if you want to become a YouTube influencer, you say there and you type in Google, how do I become a YouTube influencer? One of those is a lot of guidelines on stuff you could do. But if you go to YouTube, it specifically says how they're going to bring marketing to your page that you get paid the marketing from. Instagram has the same thing. So you have to look at the specific rule that says you make income on Instagram by making sure you have, whatever connected so that they can drive revenue to your influencing activities. And I apologize, I don't know the one for Instagram, but I know that YouTube is 10,000 views to your channel and then 1,000 views to your video, and you have to be open at least a month. And then you have to have a Google AdSense account. So I have 4 criteria that I have to achieve: 10,000 views, 1,000 view to a video, be open a month, and have a Google AdSense calendar connected to it. Well, as soon as I have that, I'm working on, well, how do I get 10,000 views? How do I drive traffic to my views? How do I share my content so people are going to my page? And then once I get 10,000 views, then I have to say, well, how do I get 1,000 views of this one video, or maybe this video? And or maybe I'm trying to get 1,000 views of 5 or 6 of them, because they all are kind of like in the lead. Maybe they're all kind of like coming up like this, right, on my ratings. But or how do I get subscribers, and so once you know the 4 criteria to at least open the door to income, then you're driving your goals every day towards those specific things, not abstractly. You're focusing like, how do I get this to happen?
Focusing is critically important.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have to focus for years on something very specific in order to make some progress.
Yeah, and I'll say there has to be periods of accountability. So like, even with my body, I go get my body scanned every 6 months, and this laser tells me you suck or whatever. Because like I've gone down in my body percentages, um, but I have to look at the data in that accountability to say what's happening. And some of that, sometimes it is like you haven't been eating enough protein in connection with your activities, or you've been doing too much cardio in connection with your activities, and you should be more in a steady state activity, right? And so once you start to refine the rules, they're not negotiable, because you realize like that's what it is. Like that rule has become like it's proven.
That's the
So,
reality.
yeah, and so you can't, like, if a rule is not really negotiable, it helps you realize that that's like a stable thing. Like that's just something that keeps your process going, is complying with that thing, because it's become reliable. Like it's something you've proven over and over again through refinement. That you're like, if I do not do the following, that will not happen.
That was such a judgy assessment.
It was, but I'm also, I don't like, that's my process. Like, I'm not talking about people. I mean, I think sometimes we
I know,
misrepresent.
but after that much effort, instead of being like, I learned some things, it's just like, I suck. I do kind of relate though. Sometimes we're really hard on ourselves, especially if we're putting all the effort in and we know what we want. Sometimes we can get really impatient when the things don't fall into place as quickly and easily as we would like.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're correct. I body shame myself initially, but I had lost 20 pounds. And so I thought going in, like things would be like, I felt good because I looked good, I felt good, but I was still almost 30% body fat. And so you're kind of like, what? I'm I'm so
Well,
far.
what's wrong with being 30% body fat? If you look good and you feel good, who cares?
It wasn't where I wanted to be. Like I felt gooey. Like I realized I had an incorrect image of what I thought I was achieving. And so I don't go in there and say I suck anymore, because that was like my first one. And now, like in a couple weeks, I'm going to be on my sixth one.
Okay.
And I'm learning now, like I'm learning as I go through, that as long as I'm going down, like that's super exciting because I'm still progressing.
Yeah.
But I misunderstand what it means to achieve the goal. Like I still must misunderstand because I'm not achieving the goal, right? And so as you
But look
continue,
how consistent you are. I'm
yeah,
really proud of you for sticking to it, especially when you're so discouraged. It's hard to keep going and focusing on, especially something as like daily and consistently as eating, right? It's something that you have to pay attention to all the time.
yeah. Well, and I also recognize that setting it out every 6 months, in the interim period, I totally flounder sometimes, because I know that I can. Like I psychologically know that I'm not being held accountable in 120 days. I know that I have this period of time. Like I'm not in 90 days. So
You
usually
give
with
yourself a little flexibility sometimes. Good.
yeah. So but I also know that in that time period, I'm exploring, I'm experimenting, I'm trying stuff. So I might like maybe I might jump off keto for a while. I might just be more Mediterranean, or I might like, I'm for right now, I've been in carb cycling. So it's the same thing with your business. You might say, maybe I really liked Facebook for a while, but I'm going to try Instagram, or maybe I really liked Instagram for a while. I'm going to try YouTube, or maybe you try, maybe, Google's been working. I'm going to try Bing or Yahoo. I'm going to, and you just try stuff because you're not in the period of accountability where it like automatically matters. Like for me, I used to hate Christmas time because that was accountability. Like if you had not made money, like you're Jimmy Stewart, like you're like you're like, holy cow, like how do I provide for my family? Like I have to put out, whatever it might be. I have to find Christmas.
Magic.
Yeah, I have to pay for this thing that
Yeah.
is important. Like I have, family gifts. I got like my personal family gifts, my extended family gifts. I got dinners. I got employees I need to do some stuff for. And so
That does sound stressful.
it is because it's all extra money. Like it's your gratitude at the end of your expected money. And you could choose to just defect. Like, I mean, if you've watched Skipping Christmas, like Tim Allen tried.
Well, it sounds like it impacted your ability to enjoy Christmas.
Absolutely. Like there was definitely times like you couldn't, there was some years I could not wait for Christmas to be over because I knew the accountability was over. Like I could start over, I could try again, I could continue to do it. And but there was a couple Christmases that I didn't make it, and you don't make it because people start bringing you Christmas. and and
Yeah.
their generosity is tremendously humiliating because you're like it's readily apparent to people that and that's I'm also
I
recognizing.
mean, humiliating, don't love that because sometimes you want to give Christmas to someone who's struggling and you don't want them to feel like they're a loser because you're helping them out.
I totally agree. So you have to. I realized I had to change the process because I got to the point where I provided people Christmas. But what I would do instead was I would say, I just want to give you this. I don't know if you need it or not. I don't know if I don't care if it's part of your system. I just want to bless you. Because
Yeah.
I had a person who I gave Thanksgiving because I was just kind of hearing that they were a little disgruntled, like they were kind of in scarcity. And I just door dashed them, and it was like $100 Thanksgiving meal, but I was astonished how much food you can buy for $100. Like I had Tillamook ice cream and pies and turkey. Like it was huge. Like it was. I was astonished that if you don't go to a restaurant, you can actually buy a tremendous amount of food. So this person um, receives this food and he just feels like, oh, she's like my neighbors think I'm poor. Like, right, like, is it that obvious? And I'm hearing him totally have a meltdown because he's in shaming mode about
Yeah.
receiving a gift, right? And
Right.
I said, look, and I had not told him it was me. So I'm just hearing him reference all the people he thinks it is. And they were gonna call like their church leaders, and they're like, who gave us this? Like, who thinks I'm poor? Like, and so I eventually just said, you know, I just loved you and I just wanted to, and it's my love language. And he's like, what? But it totally changed our relationship.
Instead of being thankful that he had someone who cared so much, he was worried about people thinking he didn't have very much. What a blessing to have a person that wants to give you such a lovely gift.
Yeah. And so it changed our relationship because he knew I didn't think he was poor. I just wanted to give
How
him
could
the
he
money.
believe it?
Yeah,
What
well,
was it that let him believe that?
his own mind. He thought, he was in scarcity. And when we're in scarcity, it doesn't matter how much we're making, right? You could be making 100,000 a year, but if you think you don't have enough and you're talking to people in the language of poverty and scarcity, like some people just come to your aid and say, look, I'm just trying to help you out because I can tell that you're struggling, even though apparently you're making money, but it's not enough for you. It's not working out for you because you're manifesting so much stress and anxiety about the way you're talking about money. Uh, and I also realized from that process that I can't solve people's scarcity by being
Um,
generous to them, because
yeah.
it sometimes backfires. That, people have to shape, like you have to, like, just like how you have to own your business, you have to own what it means. And now, um a person could make, like, if you just make what you need to live, like whatever that is, like even if it's $1,000, and you live the life you want to live, you're rich. Because there's Deepak Chopra talks about, no one thinks about money more than the poor. And so if all you think about is money and what you don't have, even if you have $1 million in the bank, you're broke, because you have not freed your mind up to enjoy the way you live.
Mm.
So if you can say to yourself, I've met all my needs today, you're rich, because you freed yourself from the stress of money. Like you freed yourself from that obligation. You're not living in scarcity and in poverty. If you can say, all my bills are paid today, we're doing great, let's go out and we're going to go to dinner. And I'm going to say it is almost critical that you create opportunities to break the scarcity mindset, so you can say, I can afford this. Even if you say, I'm going to afford it next week, or I'm going to pay for it next week, or whatever. um I've challenged myself. Like if my daughter wanted to go to Guatemala, I had no idea how I'd pay for it. I just paid for it. I got out a credit card and I paid for it because I wanted my daughter to go to Guatemala. And because I wasn't stressed about it, there wasn't anything that impacted her ability to go to Guatemala and have a fun time. And I owned it, right? So just like if we come back to the idea of, I'm going to own this farm, it's the same thing. If you just own your life and you live inside your passions and you live in awareness that, like, you're okay today, like you're fine, and you're able to do the things you might want to do. Like if you're paying $10 for Netflix and you just don't know if you really like Netflix, but you really want some Tillamook ice cream. Well, Tillamook ice cream is only $5 for a quart, for a quart. So go down and buy a Tillamook that's $5. Like it's your priorities, and you just have to say, I can afford this. I'm gonna, like, you can't say necessarily always, and I might be violating a rule, I can't afford a yacht. Well, maybe you can afford a yacht, but the question is, do you really want a yacht? Because if you don't want it, you won't be able to afford it. Like you have to want the thing. Like I want my daughter to go to Guatemala. I could afford it. I found a way to afford it.
Well, one exercise that I've mentioned before is you can just keep $100 in your wallet. And then every time you want to spend it, you can think about, like, you have the ability to buy that thing. And you can just think about the abundance of the possibility, freedom, whatever, the opportunity to buy the thing. You could spend that money 10 times a day, and that could bring abundance without ever spending it.
Absolutely. However you want to enjoy it. But sometimes, you go down to the Italian bakery and you buy Zapola because you're like, I have no reason to not eat what I want today, and I just would like to.
I'm really looking forward to trying that.
It's so good.
When's the last time you had one?
It's been a while, because I totally, I recognize it. Like, we'll just say August was a little bit intense. So I was kind of like off the reservation, off the diet. Like I was not following the diet very well, and I ate whatever I wanted.
So you were self-care, paying attention to you and helping yourself out with some coping mechanisms that were
So
fine.
yeah, but and also self-destructive.
Maybe.
Well, I think sometimes it's, I don't know. I think sometimes you have to embrace self-destruction. I mean, you can't like destroy yourself, but like you can say, I just am not going to pay attention to this because I'm too tight. I need to realize that I can take a vacation for a little bit from this thing, because I know I can get back on and start again.
But are you comparing eating ice cream to self-destruction?
Um, for me, it was because I knew that I was totally blowing my calorie count, right? It's like if I normally eat 2,500 calories a day and I was at 4 to 5,000 calories a day, you're like, I'm definitely not in a calorie deficit, which is one of the rules about, which is about, like if you're trying to lose body fat, you're supposed to be in a deficit in connection. So in order to get, if you ate 5,000 calories, like that is a lot of exercise. Like that's a lot of engagement.
I have difficulty understanding that perspective, but it does sound hard.
Yeah, it I'm not saying that there's not problems. There's not a process to it, right? And I'm not saying that there's even stuff I've said that wasn't potentially toxic in nature or manifesting some toxicity. Um, but I'm also aware of that. And so the process is, even though we're aware that we're in our process, you 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 can own some stuff that's not in your best interest. Like that's why people goes to bars on Friday nights, because they actually don't want to pay attention anymore to what they're doing. They are probably aware that they're engaging in a self-destructive behavior, but they're also like, I don't have another one that's least destructive at the moment. And I'm going to be back on my game Monday, but I need to take a break from the rules.
We're all doing our best, aren't we?
Absolutely. All right, it's been about an hour and it's been fun, and I think we've had a very good conversation. So these sessions do happen once a month. They are free. They are workshops. They are not supposed to necessarily be lectures or presentations, and we try to keep it more of a podcast mode. So we hope anybody who desires will join. And if you check our website, markerlawmediation.com, it has the classes listed. Also, stewardgrowth.com has the classes listed. You can find us on Instagram under Steward Growth. The YouTube channel is in development, and we'll hopefully have all of the podcasts on there shortly. So we're excited and enjoy these programs.
Feel free to submit topics for us to discuss.
Absolutely.